All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Outcast Haven for another deck profile. We are now we're right into ProQuest season. We were lucky enough to have an incredibly interesting and different, unique take on a Starvo deck win our first ProQuest. Andrew is no stranger to winning in TCGs. John is no stranger to building really good decks in TCGs. They're like the perfect combo, and they've been doing it for a while. So they graciously agreed to come on and talk about their Starvo deck. So, guys, thanks so much for coming on, and we'll get this thing started. So, first off, Andrew was the pilot of the deck that won it. John played the same deck and is the architect of the deck. So, Andrew, congratulations on the ProQuest win, #1 in Minnesota. We know it's not an easy state to win in, and you took it down with an interesting Starvo deck. So, you want to tell us a little bit about your day, what you played, and how Swiss went in Top Cut?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a long day. It was like 10 hours. Started off round 1 and played a new Ice Lexi, which was a pretty chill matchup. And going into round 2, ran into John, and we're just like, oh my gosh, what happened? Because basically kind of like a backstory on it. I was planning on running Lexi at this event, and then John was like, hey, I got this awesome Starvo list. And I played like everything into it, like all the meta decks. And I was like, all right, like, I'll beat you with this and make some adjustments and start beating that deck. Like 2 weeks later, I'm just like, why don't I just run this deck? And so then like basically pivot the night before. I'm like, all right, can I borrow these cards? And I'm calling up like everybody locally, like, hey. So anyways, basically I get all this stuff together like at the event. And I'm like, all right, this is the first time playing. Let's play a quick warm-up match. And so play one of my buddies. He kind of smacks me around a bit with ninjas. And I'm like, all right, I'm ready. And yeah, next thing you know, round 2, I'm going into John here. And basically, I mean, it was a close match. Rounds 2 and 3, I awakened. So he hit me for like 11, then I hit him for like 30, and he cried a little bit. And then, I stopped him with the Mount Heroic on top of it. But I don't know. It was a pretty tight match, and I just had like the double fuse Oakenolds and stuff and kind of like closed it out. But yeah, I don't know if John has any thoughts on that matchup. It really sucks meeting round 2 with the person who gave you the deck list.
Yeah, I mean, the deck is kind of tuned for the mirror to be very high rolly, and we're just going to like punch them harder than they can punch us, which is probably not the best strategy, but it can work. And but then when you play in the mirror where both your strategies just punch harder, it's just like, well, he drew 2 awakenings right away. And then came in with like an Oakenold after that into like Mount Heroic, and I was like, well, I guess I'm dead. So yeah, I just it's Bravo can definitely high roll, and I didn't have strong enough hands, and
yeah, you went X1 of the day, right, Andrew? So you went 5-1, and you lost. Which round did you take your loss in?
Yeah, so I played 6 rounds, of course, before Top Cut, and I actually went 5-0, and then the finalist in the 6th round. And I could have told them where I am, like, I'm fine with losing this one because we're both a lock at this point. And sure enough, I lose it. But yeah, like it was a good match. I mean, he played really well, and I think it just goes to show the finals could have gone either way too. I'm just a good player. So
yeah, we had 3 rounds, so it was a top 8. And you played, what were your matchups in Top Cut?
Let's see, Top Cut, I played Nick from Outcast. Or I guess he's pretty chill with you guys all the time. I played him in the first round. He cried a bit. I mean, he didn't actually cry, but like he would have cried like if he was a crier, because like I played double Mount Heroic twice, I think, in that game. And then my final turn, I had like 3 surges. And I go like 7, 8, 10. The last one's like an unfused Oakenol for free. And so literally just like 3 card, I don't know, what, like 25 or something.
Yeah.
It was like the most disgusting thing I've done in this card game yet. It's like that feel when you're like, I'm just gonna apologize for what happened because it was like completely ridiculous.
So
Nick was on Starvo, for those wondering.
Yeah.
This is the mirror match. This was me versus like a regular Starvo. Yeah, more defense heavy, but
yeah, he was playing more the elemental heavy version of the deck. So what did you play round 2 of Top Cut?
let's see. So round 2, I just beat Nick. Oh yeah, so in round 2, I run into Chain actually. This was Patrick McGregor. Really good player. This one was like a super close matchup. Basically, he's like a pretty great guy. Super funny commentary during the match. Like he'll kind of like commentate his own games, and so you're just like chilling there. He's like, I think I like played Mount Heroic. I come in for 7 with like a Scar, play Wounding Blow for 7. He's like, what the heck is this? This is like a generic card for 7, and it's free. Like, what the heck is this garbage? He just like has like this great commentary and super lighthearted.
Yeah.
Actually, like I was walking out and I was like, yeah, I almost played Alexi, and he like shouts out of his car. He's like, why didn't you play freaking Alexi? I could have won today.
Yeah, Patrick.
So,
yeah. Everybody locally knows Patrick really well because Patrick's a really good player. He builds really good decks. He's like very analytical about the game. But the best part about Patrick is definitely his like personal commentary of what's happening because he just talks the whole time. And it's funny because in some matches like that can be annoying. You could be like, okay, I get it, dude, stop. But Patrick's like genuinely he's just talking, like he's just verbalizing what's in his head, and it's usually funny, and he's having a good time, and he's very like friendly about it. And you know, for an intense moment, sometimes it's actually kind of nice because you can get planned sometimes in those intense moments, and you get in your own head. And Patrick kind of breaks the tension of the game for you and makes it a little bit more relaxed to play. So, but then you had the like the revenge game, right? In your final was your chance to take that one loss back.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like the finals was the grudge match. You know, coming back in my one loss on the day, playing Matt Tickle. Yeah, no, it was like a really. I came out to like a pretty fiery start. I think I let off with like, I mean, he dealt like 17 damage. I was down to 23, but I was just like sitting on his hand that was so gold that I was like, yeah, this is totally worth it. I hit him back for like a bunch. I think I did like 14 or something. And then there's one round. I mean, it's on video actually on your guys' site, but I think I go like 7 into like a crippling crush 14 with like Mount Heroic in play, and I pitched like 2 Earths for the Mount Heroic, and he's just like gross.
Yeah.
But I'm like, yeah, Mount Heroic stays in play too, and he's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. When you played,
that was like a great.
When you played the crippling on the Mount Heroic turn, that's pretty disgusting, and that's the basic concept of the deck, right? Is like you guys. When I know when we talked to John about it, when we were talking about it, you know, that was John's thing, was he was trying to abuse, and I think isn't the official name of the deck Mount Heroic is OP, or something like that. Yeah. So John, why don't you break down like kind of your thought process behind why you chose Mount Heroic? Because I think a lot of people looked at Starvo and went the elemental heavy route to try to abuse it, and I know there's like great value, right, in Autumn's touching. Like every turn you basically fuse Autumn's touch for, you know, 8, 9, whatever, dominate, go again into a hammer is a really consistent damage output. But I will say one of the things that I found when you play that deck is that it's a lot of vanilla damage, and the damage output can at times be inconsistent because you don't have guaranteed go again. You're reliant on the fuse, and when you miss the fuse, sometimes you just go, yeah, I guess I just play Autumn's touch for 6 and I arsenal and pass. And that's, you have like these really down turns at times when you can't fuse and you're doing a lot of digging trying to keep the fusing consistent. So I know you went with the Mount Heroic specifically to try and get like the aggression level to just be consistent and high, right?
Yeah, so essentially, you know, before this I played Oldhim. And the longer I played with Oldhim, the more I grew to hate elemental cards. They all suck. They're all 2-block. They do nothing good. So in New Bravo, I think I took a bit of that inspiration where I really didn't want to dive into like all of the elements, because then you're just running all these 2-block cards that are rather subpar. But the one elements that like almost always make sense in the Bravo are like the blue earth attacks, because they're all 3. So if you're gonna have a fuse, one of them may as well be a blue earth that can swing out the attack for you. You don't need to have a 4th card for this combo to work. And once you're there, you're already on 9 blue earths. So it's like, hey, maybe we can fit in Channel Mount Heroic in here. We have the lightning card pool. Can we just run Heroic? And from there, that's where I started messing around with everything from like Flock or whatever, to get the Quicken tokens, to silly things like Razor Reflex, trying all these different go again options and then thinning down to what actually worked.
Mm-hmm.
And just trying to take the best of like a Mount Heroic Briar with like Awakening as a stupidly broken card, and a better armor suite. So that was the theory behind it.
Yeah. So I mean we'll start there. So that's like the first thing I have pulled up. We obviously you're playing Winter's Wail as your weapon. Did you guys do a lot of weapon swings? Was it an off turn thing? Was it just like a finisher if you happen to have a card left over? Like, or was the Winter's Wail just like, yeah, it's a weapon, so this is what we're gonna play because it's the best version of the weapon for the deck?
I think Whale comes up the most when you're in off turns, where you maybe hold 2 cards and it might look like, Entwine Lightning showing your Heaven's Claw, and then you pitch Heaven Claws for Hammer. So like Hammer is still a great value. It's just that typically when we're swinging Hammer, it's also like 4 go again and then Hammer, if we can make it work that way. And the 1 card for 4 value has always been great. So if we can keep that up on our bad turns, that's kind of like our goal. Mm-hmm. We don't really want to be swinging like a blue for 5 or something, or just swinging Hammer on a turn. Because if we are blocking, then we're blocking with 2 blockers.
Yeah, that's fair. So then the equipment, what was the logic behind the equipment? I know you said it was basically high block value was your goal, right?
Yeah, so there are a couple things going on in the deck. So one of the best, most reliable go-again cards is Scar for Scar. Mm-hmm. And one of the most overpowered cards that Guardian has access to is Awakening. And both of them want you to take damage. And part of what armor allows you to do is it allows you to take a false deficit in health.
Yep.
Because while I may be sitting at 10 and you're sitting at 20, I'm actually sitting at 22. Because I have 12 armor block remaining. And I can basically take all the early hits, which might be bad if they on hits and such like that, in order to turn on my Scar for Scars and Awakenings, which are going to be way above curve, when I can pull in something like a Pulverize, and then on my turn it's like Scar for 7 and then Pulverize for 17, because I had Mount Heroic the previous turn. So that deficit is so valuable that it makes like the higher armor block that's more about immediate value slightly better than like the over the course of the game value that like Tunic, Crown, Shield give you. Mm-hmm. But Tunic or Crown Shield still made the list, and you can make an argument for Tunic as well. For like some of the matchups, it makes sense. Mm-hmm. But one of the main matchups that I was testing initially was a ton into Chain, and I just found that like with the 12 armor and the Heroic and Awakening, you could basically like never lose that matchup, because you have your equivalent armor value, and Awakening and Heroic are just stupidly broken. And when you pull the Pulverize and you turn off one of their attacks for a turn, and then you force out their Husk really early, the game's over in like 5 rounds. So like Tunic and that type of stuff isn't that much value, but like the Ice Shield is insane in those matchups. Yeah. It can end up being like a 2-turn Husk, because you can, if the Chain is careless and they come in with an attack and float 1 resource for their sword, you can block with your shield and turn off the sword swing completely.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing, like when you mentioned that sticks out to me, is the fact that when you have like 12 armor block, you basically level the playing field. Like I think that's oftentimes people's biggest gripe about Chain, is that they can just husk away whatever they don't want to deal with, and then they beat you the next turn sometimes. And I know, like I saw one game where Andrew really like threw the wrench in Patrick's plan, because that Stalagmite was just sitting there, and it's just like, yep, you just hang on to it. And I think that was like a huge practice in patience too, is sometimes people get jumpy with their armor and they'll block with it too quickly. And like that Stalagmite sat there for most of the game against Patrick in that semifinal. And I know, Andrew, you had a turn where I watched you just put it out there and basically just stopped him, because then he hadn't shackled yet or something, I think, and he broke the combat chain and gave it back to you. And he was just looking at it, realizing like, if I attack again, I won't go after that anyway, because the shield basically can act as like a wall, like to your point, John, to protect you. Andrew, one of the things that was interesting to me was that like Earthlore Bounty is a great block card, but I know you guys run Tome of Harvest. So how many times throughout the day did you find because you played 9 rounds, how many times did you make like seismics off of the Earthlore that you thought like that came in handy the next turn?
Yeah, I mean, it was fairly common to make use of it. I mean, we were running Glacials on the day, so 2-card 10 seems pretty good. I mean, like, also, I mean, like, if you get a free Oakenold, you can hold on to like a 3-card fused Oakenold pretty easily. Or if you have the Pulse in hand, it's like a like 2-card fused Oakenold.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like gross plays there. So yeah, I would say it was actually quite impactful in the fact that it's 3 resources. That's 9 turns worth of Tunic, right?
Yeah.
So pretty wild. Yeah, and like Tome of Harvest was just great in general too, because like sometimes you'll have a turn where you're like, all right, like I have Mount Heroic out, but don't have any 0-cost attacks. So then just like making a cycle, going for the moon there. It can really like turn around like a not great hand into something pretty amazing. So
yeah. I think that's
overall though, yeah, Earthlore was pretty awesome, I'd say.
Yeah, I think it's one of those cards that people are still trying to figure out, and this is like one of the best uses of it. Tome of Harvest seems to be like the clear front runner for like the best use of the card, and it's cool to see it get out and play because it's a card that I think sometimes misses. And then I know like Snapdragons is something that Oldham messed around with a bunch, and there's lots of Starvos that were running E-Strikes. Like people were messing with E-Strikes with Snapdragons. Always funny to me to see like Guardians with Snapdragons, just because it's like something historically in the game that has been uncommon, and it's become kind of a thing. So it's always fun to see that. So let's talk through your attack actions, because I think this is where things start to get interesting, and you start to see some of the cool plays that you guys have in the deck. So how many blue Earth cards did you have to try and stick Mount Heroic and keep it around for multiple turns?
So we're looking at 12 in the main deck, with a sideboard of 2 blue Earthlore Surges. In certain matchups, like the Guardian Mirror, we're going to be looking to keep the Heroic around for multiple turns if we can. They're longer games, so we're not looking to be as explosive, and we'll be more content to be like, swing a Glacial for 13, and look, it's staying. So yeah, I think when we're sideboarding in the full Glacial suite, it's quite common for us to be on the Earthlore Surges as well.
Okay. What did you find were like the most impactful cards in like different matchups in your opinion, like from the attack suite? Because we have ranging everything from like these big cripplings and pulverizes and Oakenolds, which are really just on their own, they're like not generically, but they're just powerful cards. Everything they do is impactful on the game. And then I think sometimes people look at cards like Scar and Lightning Surge or Wounding Blow, and they can be just on the surface they're 0 for 4s, but with Mount Heroic they become 0 for 7s. But what did you guys find like in different matchups where like your more powerful cards that you thought weren't as good in certain matchups, and like your what were you citing in and out, I guess, of different matchups?
Yeah, totally. I'd say like, I mean, Glacial was something that was pretty nice in the mirror, for instance. Just like some Dominate to close things out. Just like kind of solid into defensive decks in general. So if you're into like Viscerai or I don't know, like anything that's trying to block you out, like Oldham would be a solid deck too. I'd say the Crippling Crushes are really effective into aggro decks. Just like giving you a chance to set up, being able to pull them, but also like I naturally played them quite a few times too, especially in the chain. You can kind of like rip Husk usually, but like having something that threatens their hand is like super impactful. Yeah, Awakening is just like a solid card. Oakenold is it's kind of obvious how good Oakenold is, especially when you double fuse it. But yeah, that's kind of like
Andrew. I know Andrew also really loves the Exudes.
I love Exude.
I save them for the matchups that like I know the opponent will be on D reacts, but Andrew's just like, yeah, I see Exude, I run it.
Yeah, I mean, like you can dump your whole hand. Like I don't know, it's a 4, but every blue turns into +2 damage, which at instant speed. I mean, yeah, if you'd like the idea of running like attack reactions, I mean, this card's pretty nuts. It shuts down D reacts too. Even playing into Patrick, I think I boosted it by 2, and I'm convinced that 2 damage like won me the game. Like this is like round 2 or 3, and I played a 4, and I was like, I don't want this card in Arsenal, and I don't want to snaps this early. Then I was like, wait a second, Exude, and just like that extra 2 damage.
Yeah, it's like those.
I think
it offers. It offers something similar to what like Lexi has with Shock Charmers too, as like it's
Mhm.
obviously not accessible all the time, but like especially early game, sometimes you just want to try to get your hand cycled to maybe draw into like a more powerful hand, or you're going to arsenal a certain card and you want a different hand to play with that card, and it kind of allows a way to just kind of throw some resources away and get your hand cycled out fast, which is really good.
Yeah, probably the funniest matchup. I played it on a Mount Heroic turn against Nick, who was running like a lot of D-Reacts.
Yeah.
So I was like, watch this. Coming for 7, Snapdragon's it. Coming for 8, coming for 10. And I'm just like, if he's got a D-React, like I just
yeah, it's just over at that point, right?
25, no D-Reacts allowed. Like, yeah.
Yeah, and I think as far as other attacks go, though, the weirdest one is probably the wounding blow we have to talk about.
Yeah, I think that was one that definitely got some commentary from Patrick, where I think it was one of my favorite moments of the day when Patrick said something to the effect of, "I'm over here fighting my own blood debt, and you're playing a generic that's 7. This is stupid." And he was like, it was like almost triggered him in like a hilarious way, because he's just like, "Are you kidding me right now? Like, this is the stupidest thing ever." And then he did I think comment to John's point. John pointed out that it's a 0 for 4 damage that blocks for 3, and Patrick caught every single one of those stats. He's like, "This card's stupid. This card's stupid." So yeah, talk about the choice of that one, John.
Yeah, I think, as I said, a lot of the initial testing of the deck was into chain. And one of the things that came up several times, also into decks like Lexi and stuff, I'd be in winning positions and then I'd draw a hand where like all I really need to do is block with a couple of cards and swing like lethal. And I would draw like 2 instants and a couple 2 blocks or something like that. And it's just too often I got block screwed where I needed to be able to block in certain moments and I couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I started looking for reducing some of the 2 blocks. I was on like yellow lightning surges and even considering yellow scar for scars, just like, oh, all this go again for Mount Heroic. But what it comes down to is that Wounding Blow is in there for the really fast matchups where we're trading damage, and I just need my first channel Mount Heroic to be overpowered. So I need to find at least like 3 or so 0 cost attacks within a couple turns to get 12-ish value out of it, where I can go scar for scar into Wounding Blow to end the turn. And then the next turn, if all I have is a Wounding Blow, I can still go Wounding Blow, Snapdragon's it, and then swing a 7 with a blue pitched, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it really just like increases the stats on us being able to get value out of the first Mount Heroic without reducing our block count. And then for the matchups where we're not desperately trying to rush in like 4 or 5 turns, like a chain matchup, then we can just sideboard in the red glacials and be more content and be like, no, we'll just swing 13 this round, keep the heroic around if we drew 2 blue, and then move on.
Yeah, for sure. So let's we move down. We have 1 defense reaction, and it's not in there for a defense reaction. I assume it's in there because it's earth and ice, right? That's like its primary. Yeah. It's funny because like some of these decks now, like you get like the pulses in the deck, and when they first came out, everyone was trying to figure out how you would use them best. And I think in Starvo, it's just like the natural thing is like, well, we put them in there because they're 2 elements, and then hopefully we never have to play them. We could just hold 2 of them, 1 or 2 of them for like 3 turns in a row, and just like guarantee potential fuses. But in your non-attack suite, let's talk about, we obviously have Channel Mount Heroic, but then the other stuff. So the Channel Lake Frigid, Tome of Harvest, Winter's Bite, Earthlore Surges, the Candle Hold. I assume the Candle Hold was for a fusion target, but then talk about the other choices and why you went with all of them.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to just what is the best options in that element. So pretty much all of our blue cards, with the exception of like Awakening and a single blue Glacial, they're going to be element cards. So you see Channel, make it in there because it's a 3 block, and sometimes you're going to cast the Channel if you can. You have Winter's Bite because, well, it's a 2 block that like you don't really want to block with. At times, in order to get value out of it, all you need to do is like hard cast it, and you're at least stripping a card from a hand. Mm-hmm. So blocking for 2 with some random other blue ice card is going to trade down in value. But with this, I can trade even on value almost every single time, assuming they don't have a Tunic resource up and other ways to spend the resources. Mm-hmm. And then, Tome of Harvest, it just happens to work well with Earthlore Bounty. It's another way to just high roll in these extremely fast high high-powered games, it's another way for us to just, well, looks like I got a free, Oakenol or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, Candlehold is there. I don't really like the card as much in our version just because I'm not like hyper-focused on fusing, but you throw it in there against Guardian in case the game goes forever.
Yeah.
You can pull back some threats.
Yeah,
I can set up a pretty easy fuse if you draw it with Volthaven too. Just set the Oakenhold and Earth Blue on top, and
yeah. It's one of those cards that has, plenty of like niche uses sometimes, even beyond the fuse, where you can put a card on top that you think you need to see at the right time, or it is a 3 block. I think that's a benefit of that card that is, I think, sometimes overlooked. I remember, like, I'm a big Guardian player, and Candlehold never kind of made it even, in my, like, I never paid attention to it because I just didn't care. I was like, yeah, that's whatever. That's a Briar card. And the first time I went to block with it, because I was like forced into blocking with it when we were like testing with Starvo, I was like, this card blocks for 3. That's pretty good. Like, I can't complain about a card that blocks for 3, which just continues to prove that, the 3 block is underrated. You play a deck when you're used to 3 blocks, especially as like a Guardian player. Then you start looking at 2 blocks, you're like, this is kind of gross. Like, I don't like the cards that block for 2. They're no fun. So, but then we'll round it out. We'll talk about the last cards that come up in the deck, and that is your instance. So, Pulse of Volthaven, again, Pulse of Volthaven is, like, I think, a card that, again, can be underappreciated simply because it can be paired with a hammer. Like, a bad turn can be Pulse of Volthaven, hammer for 8, which is, really good value out of just a couple of cards in your hand. Blinks, were blinks in there primarily for the fuse, or how often did you find yourself using them on, like, the 0 cost Channel Mount Heroic turns?
Yeah, actually, it's more of a sideboard card. It's really for like defensive matchups, or if you're into Prism, you might have Arclights and stuff. Yeah, I didn't actually run the card very often at all in the day. So,
okay,
yeah,
that makes sense. It feels like a card that definitely can be a little bit of a stretch for most of, like, the Starvo builds to use, because it's resource intensive. It kind of costs your whole hand to attack and swing hammer, so there's nothing you can really do. But I suppose there are some niche uses in, like, in your build where you could actually get some value out of going like 0 for 4 or 0 for 7 with Channel Mount Heroic, go again into 0 for 7, blink it, and then play another 0 potentially. It's almost like a Snapdragons in your deck, which is pretty cool. And then John, I know, is a big fan of Awakening. That's a card that, again, I didn't play much Oldhim. I've always been a Bravo player, so I was always kind of jealous of Awakening because I wish I had it in Bravo and matchups where I needed a catch up. But that card is just crazy, right? Like, everyone's on the same page that Awakening is just absurd, especially if you draw it with an Earth card.
Yeah, I think the card would be good if it were just like an action, but the instant effect is like so nuts.
Yeah.
Like, you can play it on their turn, have the 14 attack like on your turn.
Yeah.
So crazy. So
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you watch round 2, me versus John, it's hilarious. Like, I take 11, and John's probably feeling good about himself. And I like Awakening, deal 14. He's like, okay, full block. And I just like, I got it again, buddy. Like,
yeah. It's such a Awakening is such a tempo card. I think it in some ways it can almost invalidate certain decks' attempts at regaining tempo, where decks will be like, well, I gave you a bunch of damage, now I can kind of minimally defend and maintain it, and you just go, no, you won't be maintaining this tempo because I will be going and getting whatever card I'd like from my deck at this point now.
Yeah, and definitely one of the things that the deck can do is between Heroic and Awakening, you can come up with like so much individual value on one turn that like decks that want to be defensive can struggle with it, like Prism when they're trying to defend shields, or just another Guardian, where these decks are used to being able to block if they need to. But when you toss out a channel and then swing like a single card for 7, that turn wasn't that great, but your next turn is going to come in for like 21. And very few hands can ever deal with that. So when these defensive decks, like Prism, that want to defend their shields, are trying to hit you, Awakening is another one of those tools where you can play Awakening, and then on your turn, you're like, E-Strike for 5, go again. Lightning Surge from Arsenal for 4. And then a Pulverize on top of everything else. So it definitely lets you overwhelm the opponent's defenses and just in general, Pulverize is so stupid. The fact that they printed Awakening and Pulverize should never have happened. You can 2-card 18 value. It's just, it's silly.
It's one of those cards too where like I think the fact that like Awakening has access to the Earth Fuse to double it too sometimes is even an underrated thing, because people don't appreciate that you just sometimes have it. Like you have Awakening and you just happen to have an Earth card and you're like, oh, look at that, I can actually defend with this other card in my hand and just take like 5 damage, then play Awakening, show them the Earth card, get 10 of them. So now you only went down by 5. Like it shouldn't catch you up by tripling the life differential almost, with a Pulverize. But it's a silly card that definitely, if nothing else, you almost feel like it should have had that legendary keyword they like to use, where it's like, maybe this should be a one of. Like this shouldn't be some, because if you draw it on back-to-back turns, you basically just win. If you get down by 10, they're like, no, I full block, and you're like, yeah, I got the other one, so let's run it back. So,
yeah, I was literally like 14. John's like, okay, take 5. I'm like, wait, reactions. Play Awakening.
The old double Awakening. It's a rough thing to run into. So, guys, thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing the deck. Thanks for talking about your experience. Andrew, congratulations again on your win. Always well deserved.
Yeah,
I know when we played Destiny, you were always thought of highly in the community as a very good player and someone that was great to play. John, you've always been highly thought of for your decks, and we appreciate this is your second deck profile on the channel. So we look forward to having you guys back many times in the future. So congratulations again, and
see you next set.
Yeah, we'll just keep running it back, right? Maybe something spicy later in ProQuest season when the meta fleshes out and you can come up with a spicy counter to the meta. So seriously, thank you guys again. We appreciate you coming on. Thank you everybody for watching. We'll be back with more deck techs as this ProQuest season goes on, and we will see you next time. Peace.